number one is we have 59,000 members of the AANA. We have about 63,000 CRNAs in the country. And think about if every single one of them used that voice of nursing to talk about what we do. I think one of the things that has been a challenge for nursing is using the power of their voice. And you'll see it in the literature all over the place, is how do we bring nursing to not say, I'm just a nurse? I think that is something we've got to get ourselves out of and talk about the amazing things that we do. And it's okay to brag about us. And think about if we had everybody out there talking about what you do every day as a clinician. I took care of 5 patients today. I made a difference in their lives. I made a difference in the lives of their family. And what that does is I'm making a difference in healthcare. So learning that piece and transitioning to using that voice is incredibly important.
What does it look like to be an advocate? Many of you who are pursuing CRNA know that advocacy is important, but what does it actually look like to be an advocate, not only as an ICU nurse, but as you transition into the role of being a CRNA? Many of you know that CRNA schools are looking for these types of roles through leadership. In today's episode, we're going to reveal what it means to be an advocate, both as an ICU nurse and as you transition into your role of being a CRNA. So in today's episode, I have brought you a very special guest, someone who has over 20 years of being an advocate for the CRNA profession, Dr. Angela Mund. Dr. Angela Mund received a certificate in nurse anesthesia from the Minneapolis Veterans Affairs School of Nurse Anesthesia in 1998. She graduated from the University of Minnesota with a Master of Science degree in 1999 and a Doctor of Nursing Practice in 2008. She has been very active in nurse anesthesiology for over 20 years, including serving as the president of the Association of Veterans Affairs of Nurse Anesthetists and the president of South Carolina's Association of Nurse Anesthetists, as well as several AANA committees. Currently, Dr. Mund is chair of the Department of Clinical Sciences at the Medical University of South Carolina, a leading team of faculty, staff from physician assistants, nurse anesthesia, cardiovascular perfusion, healthcare studies, and genetic counseling programs. Her areas of scholarship are healthcare policy and cardiovascular anesthesia. Dr. Mund is also the president of the American Association of Anesthesiology. So excited to have her on the show. Let's give her a warm welcome and let's get into today's episode. All right, welcome Dr. Angela Mund to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Jenny, I am so grateful to have the opportunity to talk about one of my absolute favorite topics. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so very much. And I'm so excited, you guys, for this episode. I think it's going to be really important as you embark on your journey to become a CRNA. And I know many of you are probably wondering, what is it really going to be like as you transition into the role of a CRNA? And advocacy is at the heart of being a CRNA. And there's no better person to come on this episode or this platform and discuss this topic with you today. And so, Dr. Angela Mund has had over 20 years of advocacy for this profession. So I would love to kind of get into it and kind of talk about, how, if any, does the advocacy role of an ICU nurse differ from that of being a CRNA?
Well, I think the first thing to keep in mind is that we have such a narrow definition, I think, of advocacy, that it's only political advocacy and it's only on the federal stage. But in reality, you've been advocating for patients every single day of your career in the ICU. And I think that's what makes nurses such great advocates on a bigger stage. We've been advocating for patient to staff ratios. We're advocating with physicians on how our patients should be managed. We are used to the art of negotiation. We do that all the time. And I think sometimes nursing, especially as they come into an advanced practice role, including nurse anesthetists, is we start to think about, well, I've never done it before. I'm concerned about it. You've been doing it every day of your life. You really have. And all I think about is in the ICU, it is often on a smaller scale. It might be localized to your facility. It might be localized to if you have a chapter where you work of nursing. And then once you get into nurse anesthesia, just like what Jenny said, is nurse anesthetists have been advocating for a long time for our profession, our patients, and healthcare in general. So how I take a look at it is you've been here, you've been down at the base part, and now what we'll be doing is, in nurse anesthesia, is bringing it here on a bigger stage. So you've been preparing for this your whole career, in my opinion.
I love that. And I hope that gives those of you listening just encouragement and reassurance that you are exactly where you need to be. I think so many ICU nurses are somewhat intimidated by becoming a CRNA because they see it as such this much bigger role and more responsibility. But in reality, you've been doing this the entire time. Your ICU work has really prepared you to take this stage. So kind of owning that aspect of your experience and bringing it to the role of a CRNA is really, really key. So thank you. That's great. So I guess, how does the professional role of an ICU nurse then differ from the professional role of being a CRNA? If you have any insight on that.
As far as differ, I'm not sure it has to differ. I once saw a quote, my program director up at the University of Minnesota had a quote on her computer, and I can't remember who it was from, but it said nurse anesthesia is like ICU nursing on steroids.
Mm-hmm.
So really what it is it's just bigger, more engaged, I think a lot more knowledgeable, because we're preparing, when you're in an anesthesia program, we are preparing you to meet those, or your program should be preparing you to be an advocate. So by the time you graduate, you should have some experiences under your belt. You should have the knowledge to assume those roles, but you've already started it. And now you're just going to take it to a much larger stage and to a much more knowledgeable level. I really think that is it. Otherwise, I'll put it, the last couple of questions that Jenny had, I think the part that should hit home is the reason why we want you to have ICU experience is so that you are ready to meet these roles. If we didn't think that you had the professional wherewithal and professional engagement in your ICU, you're not going to get into a nurse anesthesia program. ICUs are to prepare you, not just clinically.
Yes, I love that. And I love how you mentioned the knowledge aspect, because I hear time and time again from students who start their CRNA journey after about, a few months into school. They're like, I had no idea. Like they thought they're the top of their game, right? They thought they knew they had all this knowledge as an ICU nurse with all the experience, and they get into CRNA school and they're like, wow, this is really humbling experience, because now I realize just how much I didn't know and how much more there is to know. So it's really a period of growth. And while sometimes growth can maybe feel uncomfortable, maybe is probably the best way to describe it, or sometimes maybe even painful, but CRNA school is that. It's a period of growth, and it's kind of insidious in the sense that you don't even know it's happening. I know that's how it felt for me. It was like I got to the end of my journey as a student, and I look back and I was like, wow, did I really just do that? It's just really a really amazing feeling to get to the end of your experience and realize just how far you've come. But for those of you who are just starting off and you haven't even gained acceptance yet, know that this is really just a journey in several years to get to the end point. So don't worry about not being where you wish to be, because that's part of the process, is allowing yourself to fit into the role of I'm a newbie again, right? I'm a new learner. So that's a really great insight. Thank you.
I think it's really fun to hear from graduates is that I have had so much growth, because I have to say, as a program director, that's one of my favorite parts of being a program director, is when one of our nurse anesthesia residents gets through and they graduate and they reflect back and go, oh man, I have grown as a clinician and a person and as a professional. That's why faculty do it. I got to tell you, that's why faculty do it. And your comment was, every single program director loves to hear that. So thank you for mentioning that.
You're welcome. And yeah, it is true. It's really the most beautiful thing to see kind of a person evolve. And I love how you mentioned the personal aspect of it too, because I think a lot of people just think, oh, I'm going to get all this critical care knowledge and anesthesia knowledge, but it's really a personal growth, because you're kind of tested in a sense that, well, time management, obviously, but just also kind of the interpersonal skills that you develop by working in the operating room. Again, it's one of the things you don't realize maybe where you are starting off, but when you're done with school, and even now as an 8 years practicing CRNA, I have something to learn every day in the OR, just through interpersonal skills and communication. And that bleeds into your personal life with your family, your friends. And it's really rewarding in the sense that your career path can actually make you grow as an overall person, not just as a clinician. So I think it's a really beautiful and rewarding career path for that reason too. So what would you say an ICU nurse can do somewhat professionally? Because I'm sure everyone's wondering, what can I do right now, Jenny, to better myself so I can grow into the advocacy role that I desire to be as a CRNA?
So I think there are a few things, and what has changed over time in a lot of nurse anesthesia programs is really how we take a look at every applicant in a very holistic view. It isn't just GPA anymore. And for programs using GRE, which ours does in order to lift people up that maybe their GPA isn't so great, is we take a look at everything. For example, some of the things that we look at in the program where I was the program director is we take a look at things like, do English as a second language, or do you speak another language, showing that you use right brain, left brain. And on that scale, do you play a musical instrument? Did you play college sports? All of those things that when you're applying, we look at holistically. As it ties to the profession, we take a look at, have you taken that extra step to assume leadership positions? Do you work charge? And when you work charge, make sure that when you interview that you really do articulate what that role means and how that will set you up for your future. Do you mentor others? Incredibly important, because that's what an advocate is. And I can tell you about my mentors in advocacy that play such an important role, the same as clinical mentors do. And do you do that with others? Because that lets you know that you have an interest in moving other people forward with you. Do you engage with external communities so that you get the word out of what nursing is and what an ICU nurse is? Because that's what we do in nurse anesthesia also. Do you have diversity of experiences and people that you engage with? That's incredibly important. So number one, be engaged in a lot of different things. And you'll be surprised how many of them actually work very well when you assume the role of advocate as a CRNA. The other thing I think is critically important, and I think nursing doesn't do as well, is really enviro scanning. What is going on in the world external to you? Where do you get your news? And do you do something other than Facebook? Do you read what's in the media? What's going on in healthcare, both nationally and globally? Can you articulate the challenges of healthcare in the United States and the role of nursing in those challenges, so that when you have a conversation with faculty, especially if you go to a program that has faculty heavily engaged in advocacy, being able to have that conversation, and not just on a superficial level, but on a very deep level, and not that it has to be nurse anesthesia level or about nurse anesthesia, but about healthcare and nursing. Incredibly important to know what's going on in the world around you. That will elevate you as you transition from ICU to CRNA. And quite frankly, I think once you do it, you're going to find that that piece is really fun and it's exciting, and that's going to draw you in more to this role. It really is. Know what's going on in the world around you.
I love that. And I think too, the way I think of that too, is what's really kind of unique about knowing what's going on is it allows you to kind of figure out what your place is within your community and how you can help. And a lot of that has to do with what you're passionate about, and you're naturally going to be drawn towards certain things. And I think that that's really important to pay attention to, especially early on, even as an ICU nurse, because that will then spill into your time as a CRNA, maybe in different ways. But, reading professional journals, not just the social media world, but, knowing, from a national viewpoint, whether it's the AACN, I share the AANA journal with our students inside of CRNA School Prep Academy, because I want them to be involved in the community and kind of see what we're going through and what our struggles are, so they can kind of get an idea in comparison to what the ICU nurses are equally fighting for. Because a lot of it does tend to kind of mold together in a certain way, but they are different too. And so I love that. That's definitely a unique piece that I think most people don't talk about. So thank you for sharing that. Equally so, you mentioned so many other amazing points as far as, if you're a charge nurse, understand what that role is and why are you doing it? Why did you pick that role for yourself? And how do you see yourself serving and showing up for your fellow ICU nurses? Not just I'm a charge nurse and that's period. And same thing with, being a mentor. Why does mentorship mean a lot to you? And that's actually a question I've had to ask myself a lot, because I didn't know I was going to fall into the role that I'm in now. But a lot of it stems from my own childhood and kind of my own struggles, and feeling lost and alone and scared and not knowing who to turn to and who to ask questions. And just when I did find a friend or a mentor or a peer that would give me some guidance, it meant the world to me. So for you as a professional, for you to just be that person that can lift someone else up. And I love I'm not sure where the story originated, but have you ever heard of like the boy on the ocean shore who was picking up starfish? He was walking on the ocean, the sea bank, and he was throwing starfish after starfish back into the ocean. And an old man was walking up the other direction and saw this little boy just one at a time chucking the starfish back in the ocean. And there was thousands of them, right? They're all washed up. They're going to die. And the old man was like, boy, you're wasting your time. You're never going to be able to save them all. And the boy was just like, but I'm saving this one. So he knew he was making a difference for that one starfish. And I feel like as a mentor, that's kind of how I feel like there's so many people who need mentorship, right? Thousands, millions. But the impact you can make for that one person will have a domino effect. And that's what I think mentorship is powerful, because usually when you pay it forward for one person, they then have that in their heart and they then will pay it forward for someone else. And it kind of just has this big trickle effect. So I think that's an amazing thing to strive for in your career path. But yeah, thank you for sharing all that.
Can I add something on that, Jenny? Because I think mentorship is an important thing for me a lot. And I take a look at when I went to nurse anesthesia school a long time ago, I was in a certificate program at a hospital-based program. Neither my program director or assistant program director were involved in politics or advocacy or the AANA. I don't even know if they were members. So people are always kind of surprised knowing that what I do now is how did I not have that in school? But there was a clinical CRNA that I worked with, Gail Crabtree Pergoli at the VA hospital in Minneapolis. And she was very involved in the Minnesota lawsuit against a bunch of hospital systems and anesthesiologists. That if you have not read about it, it is a very important legal case for nurse anesthesia. And she got me involved as a student writing thank yous to CRNAs around the country that had donated to our lawsuit fund, to our legal fund. And then I went to mid-year the first time as a new grad. And it's important to have a mentorship when you're on those stages to introduce you to people that are going to make a difference in your life. And then I ended up I'm almost falling into the role of serving as a region director on the Association of VA Nurse Anesthetists. When I was there, I met Laura Cohen, who is a CRNA at the VA in New Orleans, who taught me all about advocacy on the federal scale. I learned so much from our lobbyists through the AANA that if I would not have had those opportunities early in my career, I maybe would not be doing what I'm doing now related to advocacy. So I want to thank all the mentors that are out there. And for those of you that are transitioning from ICU to CRNA, find a mentor. And I'll say find mentors, because you're going to find clinical mentors, academic mentors. Find an advocacy professional mentor that will help you on so many different levels. I know they did for me, and I am so grateful for that.
That's so awesome. I love that you shared that. And it just goes to show that little things like that can really alter in a big way and make an impact on your future career and your job satisfaction. Can you mention the case again? Because I actually want to look this up too and make sure I can link to it. The Minneapolis.
Sure. They're Minnesota. It's the Minnesota Association of Nurse Anesthetists. And there was 2 lawsuits. One was a key tam action and one was a whistleblower one that we did. They ended up settling out of court about 10 years after it started. It was an incredibly stressful time to be in anesthesia in Minnesota. And it was against AANA Health.
Okay.
And then several anesthesiologists were specifically named as part of that, also as part of the fraud case.
I'm curious.
Yeah, if you Google it, it'll bring up all of the information on it. It's a pretty interesting case study on whistleblowers for Medicare billing fraud.
Awesome. Okay. Well, you guys, I'm going to link to that article in the show notes. So you can all read up on that. So thank you. All right. Well, this has been really, really insightful so far. So thank you. I was wondering too, speaking from your viewpoint, why is advocacy, we kind of touched on it already, but why is it important as they transition into the role from a student resident nurse anesthetist to the role of a CRNA?
I think about it in a few different ways. Number one is we have 59,000 members of the AANA. We have about 63,000 CRNAs in the country. And think about if every single one of them used that voice of nursing to talk about what we do.
Mm.
I think one of the things that has been a challenge for nursing is using the power of their voice. And you'll see it in the literature all over the place, is how do we bring nursing to not say I'm just a nurse? I think that is something we've got to get ourselves out of and talk about the amazing things that we do. And it's okay to brag about us.
Mm-hmm.
And think about if we had everybody out there talking about what you do every day as a clinician. I took care of 5 patients today. I made a difference in their lives. I made a difference in the lives of their family. Mm-hmm. And what that does is I'm making a difference in healthcare. Mm-hmm. So learning that piece and transitioning to using that voice is incredibly important. So that's one part, the voice of nursing and the voice of nurse anesthesia, power of voice. The other thing, and Jenny, you probably know I was probably going to say it at some point, is part of being an advocacy. An advocate is you give time, money, or both. If you can't give time, you give money. If you can't give money, you give time, and you should give both. So contribute to the political action committees at your state and at your national level, because those funds open doors for you as a nurse anesthesia resident and for nurse anesthetists to get into rooms and in front of people to talk about what we do, to the people that make a difference in everything we do every day. And to put that on a more operational kind of scale is, think about this, is if we were not advocating for reimbursement at the federal level, we meaning the AANA and all engaged CRNAs, if we weren't advocating for CRNAs to get reimbursed, so we wouldn't get reimbursed, number one. And if we weren't getting reimbursed, hospitals wouldn't hire us and we would not have jobs. So none of us would be enjoying a great quality of life that we have by virtue of being CRNAs. So your responsibility, especially as a CRNA, but it should be as soon as you are a nurse anesthesia resident, is to do those things. It's incredibly important. I'd like to quote Sandy Ouellette, who's one of my mentors as a nurse anesthesia leader, past president of the AANA and of the International Federation of Nurse Anesthetists. She's seriously amazing. And she always, one of the quotes that she says is, "We drink from wells that others have dug." So with the time that she was president of the AANA and Nancy Bruton Marie and Patrick Downey, everybody that are the leaders in our world, they're the ones who got us reimbursement of Medicare Part B. I don't know where we would be if we did not get that. I really don't. Mm-hmm. And that was CRNAs daring to be advocates and stepping out there and using their voice and their time and their money.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I love that quote, because it kind of shows that someone had to start digging that well, right? And while the initial digging of that well probably didn't benefit people, quickly or instantly, over time, that well now people can drink from it, right? Now it's serving the community, but it's the foundations of getting started. And by choosing to be an advocate for our profession, by choosing to donate your time, money, or both, you are contributing to digging those wells. You are playing that role of being able to serve people going forward, future generations of CRNAs. And I think you have to go into it with knowing that this is maybe not going to be gratifying even sometimes in your own time as a CRNA. It will be, but if you think about the big picture, those of the CRNAs who've gone before us, who started our national association, can you imagine what they would think if they knew what we did today? I mean, how amazed they would be if they're like, wow, I can't believe what we did turn into this, and how amazing, because they probably only dreamt about that, but here we are. And so can you imagine what it's going to look like 100 years from now, 200 years from now? And so that's our legacy. That's how we can contribute so that generations of CRNAs will be at the forefront and of the need in our country for anesthesia services. So I love that. That's really, really empowering. And I will also speak from the sense that when I was a student, wouldn't say I had a good idea of advocacy or even involvement. It was not something that I remember being very in my world at the time. And I graduated and put my blinders on because it just wasn't it wasn't on the forefront of what I thought was really important. Right. I was like, I'm going to work, start a family, that kind of thing. And I think so many CRNAs fall into that trap. And I think it really starts with being involved as a resident, right? When you're in school, get involved, see what really kind of getting connected and kind of see what really strikes you. And I know, like, for me, all it actually took was reaching out to Jeff Moulter. And, I love Jeff Moulter. He's a good friend of mine. But it's just like you said, all these mentors who kind of led you onto this path. Jeff was that for me. And I reached out knowing very little and feeling honestly very small, like, hey, here I am. I don't know what I'm doing, but I've heard about your business of anesthesia lecture from students who, talk really highly of it. And I would love to know more because I want to educate myself. And it just took that one reach out. And then he was like, took me under his wing and just really enlightened me. And I think that's really all it takes is as a current student to find that one person. And as Dr. Mund mentioned, you need advocates in various avenues, not just one mentor or mentors in different avenues. You need a mentor who's an advocate, a mentor clinician, a mentor, from all different levels of your personal life. I think that's really important. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's really, really insightful. And again, we wouldn't have this rewarding career path without it. So donate to your PAC. That's your state association. I even know, like me, I was like, what's a PAC? Yeah, I actually said that. I said, what's a PAC, Jeff? And he was like, oh boy, here we go. So yeah, this is after I've been a CRNA for, like over 5 years. So, okay. But that was where I was, right? And so that's called a political action committee, but all your state associations have one. So Ohio's AANA, MANA is Michigan. So all your states have their own association. You can donate to that, and I think you should do both, but the state association, national association, which is the AANA. So as a current student, and even as you transition into CRNA, you can be doing both of those things and then continue to do so. For your state associations, go to those meetings. That's a great way to not only support that, but get connected. You guys, I'm telling you right now, when I started going to the state association meetings, so many amazing opportunities and just people that I have met have just been so rewarding and made my career a lot more rewarding than I ever thought possible. Just meeting other fellow state leaders, faculty, and just all, and fellow CRNAs, just opened job opportunities for me that I never would have had otherwise. So you should be doing these things 100%, especially as you go on to become a CRNA, but get started when you're in school. That's the first way. That's the first taste of advocacy. So, and as a CRNA. So thank you.
Even consider going as an ICU nurse. I was just speaking at a meeting in Tennessee last weekend, and there was an ICU nurse that came up to me. I am seeing that more and more at state meetings, is they're coming to state meetings and coming up and meeting people and do it, be brave. Is
That's
if you
amazing.
See, oh, it's been amazing. If you see an AANA board member up there speaking, and one of us speaks at every meeting, I would say, walk up, introduce yourself, say you're interested in applying to a program, get our business card. Let us mentor you even before you start a program. We are all into bringing the best and brightest into nurse anesthesia. We really are.
Oh my gosh. I love that you mentioned that, because it's actually something that, well, I give Jeff a lot of credit, because back when me and Jeff really kind of hit the ground running with what I'm doing, we realized, wow, we really wish we could find more ways to get these students involved earlier on, because they need to have a better understanding of what our profession is about. And a lot of times, even in the interview process, you're asked these questions. And if you just have crickets, it's like, well, why are you picking this career path? But they just don't know because they haven't had the mentorship. So we started, reaching out to different state associations and actually asking if nurses could come. And surprisingly so, many of them were like, yeah, of course. And so I would love to make that more of a normal thing. And don't be afraid to reach out to your state association and ask if you can go to their upcoming meetings. We're actually in the process right now, Dr. Mund, we're reaching out to all the state associations, my team is, and myself, and we're trying to find out when the next state meeting is and if they will allow RNs to go. And so that way we can provide that point of contact for these ICU nurses. Because again, the sooner the better, and it's only going to enlighten you and allow you to feel included. And I think that's really important too when it comes to pursuing this career path, is feeling a part of a community that you so desire to be a part of is really kind of will give you that kind of confidence and that voice that, Dr. Mund spoke to as far as finding your voice. A lot of that comes from confidence. And I think the reason why nurses will downplay their careers, I'm just a nurse, it's the confidence piece. They don't feel confident in their own practice. So therefore they don't want the spotlight. And I get it. I've felt that way many times where I'm like, ooh, shadows, please. Because it makes you feel like you're going to point out all your weaknesses. People are going to see you for the fake person you are, whatever you fear, like in the imposter syndrome, essentially. But you can't let imposter syndrome lead your life. You have to own the fact that, yes, you're going to make mistakes, that yes, you're not going to always say the best thing, or you're going to stumble over your words. You're just human. And, but having that voice and that confidence piece can only start if you get involved in leadership roles, such as going to state association meetings and getting involved in different, community leadership roles and things like that as a nurse.
And we do have nurses who come to the AANA meetings also.
Awesome. Yeah. A few of ours.
I don't want to do a bunch, and I don't consider it name dropping when I bring names up. I consider it recognizing people who have done amazing things. Jermaine Wright, who also considers Jeff Moulter his mentor. He just got into a nurse anesthesia program, just starting, and he's been coming to AANA meetings, I think, for a year. I thought he was a student in a nurse anesthesia program.
Yeah.
So yeah, get yourself out there. And Jeff Moulter is amazing as a mentor to a lot of us. And yeah, show up at stuff. Half of it is showing up, just showing 100%. Up.
Yes, Jermaine, he's always been a go-getter. It's funny, when he first reached out to me, he was going to sit in on anesthesia lectures as an ICU nurse because he wanted to see what the class structure was like. So yes, he went on to be successful. And I guess I want to highlight too that, and I know Jermaine's okay with me sharing this because he'll share his story, but he also faced rejection too. So I think people just assume like, oh, if you do that, you're not going to get, it's not going to, just because you show up to these meetings doesn't mean you're a shoo-in, but what it does is it builds your foundation to be successful. And so people get these blinders on thinking, oh, they just have it easy because they have a 4.0 or they know all these people, right? So they're going to get favoritism. No, it doesn't work like that. The interview process is very straightforward, cut and dry, and they look at you as a whole picture. And so while I'm encouraging you to go and start building this foundation, don't just see it as, oh, only the people, because I think people think like, oh, well, Jermaine got into school because he did that. No, Jermaine worked really hard to get into CRNA school for years and years and years. And by doing all these small actions over and over again, he did build his own success. But it didn't just come naturally or easy or quick or easy for him either. So
he can speak the language.
Yes.
And then when you get into an interview and you can speak that language, it shows that you've prepared. And I can't say that enough. Don't come into a nurse anesthesia interview cold. You need to be prepared and speak some of the language. It will make you, and even if it isn't always perfect, I think Jenny was absolutely right with that. Even if it isn't always perfect, but if you come prepared with some of that knowledge, it's going to show that you looked at trying to be prepared, even if it was a little bit not 100% correct. Mm-hmm. You're showing effort, and that's really important.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Thank you for saying that. Because yeah, I think people are too hard on themselves. They beat themselves up if they're not perfect. I'm like, perfection's not the goal. It's just the effort, right? So what would you say the expectation is for nurses entering CRNA school? And the role of professionalism, because I think this is really important. I think especially with, shall I say, social media these days, it's so you got to be really careful. So let's kind of talk about that for a minute.
Oh, social media. Social media either is absolutely powerful for positive or for badness. Mm-hmm. It really is. Clean up your social media presence. I can't say that enough. Because I'll say, as when I was a program director, as soon as we picked who we were interviewing and narrowed it down, I went and looked for everybody on Facebook. Absolutely everybody. And a lot of faculty, I believe, do, just to look for, and not that if you are out there somewhere and celebrating and having a drink with friends, there's nothing wrong with that. Celebration is good, but we don't want to see things that maybe you don't want your grandmother to see or your mother to see. You don't want to put those things on social media because faculty won't like that either. Be very cognizant of it. And you'll see legislators look people up too. So if you are quite polarizing one way or the other, think about cleaning that up a little bit on social media. Because what I would say is nurse anesthesia, I'll speak AANA, I'll speak, kind of the highest level when we talk of advocacy, is we are bipartisan 50-50. We are not strongly Democrat or strongly Republican. We are for legislators that are pro CRNA. And be mindful about professionalism coming into those roles, that polarizing piece can be challenging if you're coming into advocacy at all, because the legislative aides that work for legislators, senators, and representatives are your age. They're early 20s, and you know that they're using social media as much as you are. So be mindful of your social media presence and what that looks like. And I have to say, in the last several years, when y'all are applying, you're getting good advice, because I have not seen anything bad in a very, very long time. Most of the time, the accounts you're doing a great job making them super private. Otherwise, as far as professionalism is, when you're working on references, those are a lot of the things that we'll ask of the people that report to you, things about leadership and professionalism. And you want to make sure that you're representing yourself on your unit in those ways. Because I have to say, when we look at references in the programs that I've been involved in, is our expectation is a perfect reference, because you handpicked them. You picked who your references are. So you should know what they're going to say about you for the most part. And most of the time we'll get some things that'll be, that could be personality. But when we get to the professionalism piece, if there's a low number in there's often a hard stop of, okay, so if the people that they work with have questions about that, we're really mindful of that in nurse anesthesia and how you present yourself as a professional. So, and I talk to nursing programs too, is when you get into the ICU right from the beginning, and if your goal is nurse anesthesia, and we see that a lot now, is I know everybody's looking at, I need to take the sickest patients, I need to go to this kind of unit, I need to know this clinically and this clinically. Keep in mind how you're perceived by the people with you. Because I can teach you anesthesia, I can teach almost anybody anesthesia, but those skills, those emotional intelligence skills, are incredibly important. And that, in my experience, is what makes or breaks the student in a program, is their ability to work with others.
I love that you mentioned that.
If you're looking for books to read, and I see behind Jenny, Watchful Care, and also read some books on emotional intelligence, that will prepare you for an interview. And then you start thinking about how you want to handle yourself as a professional, how you perceive yourself, how you read a room, how you react to the room, and how you read others. It's an incredible skill.
Yes, I agree. I love emotional intelligence, and even just in mindset in general is a really powerful tool, because I think with emotional intelligence, a lot of it goes into mindset and how because think about it, people will take offense, right? And I think when you take offense, you have to really stop and say, well, why am I taking offense? Is this really something that I should take offense to, or is it how I'm interpreting it? A lot of it is interpretation, which is the emotional intelligence piece of relatability and working with your coworkers. And because I always also like the saying that you always think people are thinking about you, but in reality, they're not. So when you are thinking, oh man, I did this or I acted this way, people are usually more focused on themselves than others at all times of the day. And so I think sometimes when you act out of like fear of people are thinking about me and how I'm acting, the reality is no, they're not. But when you kind of don't have that good insight into how you're coming across by not thinking about it, then it'll stick with them, right? A bad interaction will stick in their mind. And a little bit goes a long way. I feel like, at least in my time working as an ICU nurse, the coworkers who are the ones who are kind, pleasant, always a helping hand, didn't spend tons of time gossiping, or, they came to work to do a good job versus coming to work to see what's going on social media with your friend's phone, or just think about that. I know it's easier said than done, but that professionalism piece will play and spill into your time as a CRNA. And I hate to say this and scare you guys, but I'm just going to do it because it's real. This community is small. So even as a CRNA, when you're working as a CRNA and you go to take a job somewhere, every job I've had, one of the first things when I work somewhere and we have job openings, is people will say, does anyone know so-and-so? They'll come into the CRNA break room. They're like, does anyone know so-and-so? And you'd be surprised, almost every single time someone will say, well, I know someone who knows that person who works there. I will ask them. And so typically, before you even interview as a CRNA for a job, that staff has already been talking about you from the people that work with you. So just, you have to take professionalism very seriously, and emotional intelligence is part of that. And you can grow emotional intelligence. I mean, you're not just born with, you were born with a personality and attributes that kind of can shape your emotional intelligence, right? But really, a lot of it is built over time and awareness.
Yeah, you can build EQ. Your intelligence quotient, you really can, as compared to IQ. And you'll see when you read on it and more nurse anesthesia programs are really leaning heavy into those kinds of interviews of communication and conflict management and awareness of yourself and others, that doing a good job of that early on is going to prepare you for an interview. It really is. Because I'll tell you, there have been applicants who have a 4.0 and a high GRE. We don't take them if they don't interview well. GPA gets you in an interview typically, but the interview gets you in. And I don't care how smart you are, if you can't interact with the interview panel, our concern is that you can't interact with other people on a professional level. So that it's really important.
Love that. Thank you so much. And I love that saying too, because I've said it before, that your application gets you an interview, but the interview gets you in, because that's really that personal touch to it. Okay, so let's wrap this up. I'm going to be very respectful of your time, but I would love to kind of share lastly what current nurse anesthesia residents can do to get involved in the AANA. What are some committees they can join, so that way they can really set themselves up to be an advocate for our profession?
So most of our AANA committees have student representation. Almost all of them do, actually. The application deadline is usually around April 15th. You'll see usually January, February, there'll be a call for applications. It's an online process. You can choose more than one committee to apply for. If you don't know what committee to apply for, you can find me on the AANA website. Jenny knows where to find me. Send me an email and I'll talk you through, what you're interested in, what you're interested in learning, and I can kind of steer you to the committees that have that. You will learn too is that committee involvement. You will develop mentors and colleagues that will last your whole life, your whole career life. Consider being on a committee. It's really important. The other part that we're really mindful of, and this is something I feel strongly about, is too often I think people in leadership positions assume what everybody needs, and we don't do a good enough job of asking. So when the AANA sends out a survey asking your opinion as a nurse anesthesia resident, please fill it out. We want to know, because I'll say right here is one of the challenges that we have right now in the AANA is that those that are graduating from nurse anesthesia program, that's 0 to 4 years, are the least likely group to be members of the AANA. And we're trying to figure out why. So help us do a better job of making sure that the needs are met for our new grads, as much as we're doing those middle career, those that probably where Jenny's at. I'm probably on the far end of my career, but really, we want to hear from you. And if there's something that we can do better, you know how to get a hold. If you go to the AANA website, it will list the whole board, and there's a way to contact us. and your email will be answered. So when you get into a program and there's something that you can see that we can do better, I'll use Jermaine again. As soon as he got into a program, he reached out to me with some ideas of how we can engage ICU nurses and do some mentorship. We want to hear that. You have ideas that are different because we aren't living in that world. So join committees, attend meetings, let us know about you, respond to surveys so that we can meet your needs as a student and then as a new grad.
I love that. Well, thank you, Dr. Mund. This has been so insightful, and I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And as always, thank you so much. I appreciate you for tuning in and listening to the podcast. We will see you guys next week, and thank you again for your time.
Thanks, Jenny, and good luck on everybody getting into programs, and I look forward to seeing you in the future.
Yes, definitely. Hey, future CRNA, as always, I appreciate you and your loyalty. Thank you so very much for tuning in this week. I'd love to hear from you, so screenshot this episode and share it to your IG stories with your biggest takeaway. Don't forget to tag me at CRNA School Prep Academy so I can personally thank you. Be sure to head over to CRNASchoolPrepAcademy.com to check out our blog and gather free resources to help you along your CRNA journey. Stay strong, and I'll see you next week.